Welcome to Reels on the Rocks, the show where your hosts Whiskey and Sweet Tea discuss film from the unpretentious perspective. We celebrate Pride this month with films by LGBT directors. In this episode, we spotlight Clive Barker in his iconic 1987 film, Hellraiser. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and as always, please be advised that spoilers are ahead.
Welcome back, listeners. It's your humble Cinema Bites, and we have such sights to show you.
See, I thought you were going to greet us with "Come to Daddy."
Oh, no. Ew. No. But, yeah, so for our second and final Pride Month movie, this is actually, I guess I'll say this was the movie that gave me the idea that we should do a Pride Month. And I told you this story, but I'll tell the listeners. So this, just for the record, this is probably one of my favorite horror movies. I wouldn't say it's one of my favorite all-time movies, but just in the horror genre, this is one of my favorites. I've liked Clive Barker, but until last year, I'd never really read any of his work. Mm-hmm. So around the time, I think the tail end of 2021, I bought a bunch of books because I got back into reading, have still been trying to keep up on reading, but I got his all 3 volumes of the Books of Blood, which was like the short story anthology that got him famous. And it has an introduction written in 1997, and I read that before reading any of the stories. And it was really interesting because, he was talking about how at the time he had kind of been tired. He wasn't writing horror actively anymore. He was focusing on other genres, and he's listed as being also a fantasy and sci-fi writer. So I suppose that's what he was doing. But it's about this time. It was Halloween here in LA, and him and his partner were going to the Halloween parade in West Hollywood.
We've been there.
And yes, we have. And yeah, the whole introduction was how about the experience of going to the Halloween parade and kind of, getting into the Halloween spirit made him sort of reminisce in a positive way about his horror stories. And that's what got me to be wait, oh my God, Clive Barker's gay? I didn't know that, because he talks about his partner doing this really elaborate gargoyle costume. He did the full makeup, and he was with all these crazy prosthetics on and stuff. And I was man, marry that man. But we'll get into that. I've looked, but yeah. So he's this horror writer I've known about for a while. I'd never really gotten into his work, and I think that's part of the reason why I didn't know he was gay. But it kind of made me think oh wow, he's one of the last people I would have thought would have been, just based on his body of work.
Right. Surprise, we're everywhere.
And that kind of inspired me to do this Pride Month, not just because we did kind of have one, Nightmare on Elm Street 2. We talked about the homoeroticism and how that was actually intentional, and the writer was kind of doing an anti-masculinity sort of thing with that.
Right,
and that episode, and if I remember correctly, that episode came out during Pride Month, so we sort of did it, but we never had a dedicated Pride Month movies. And I thought, because I wanted to talk about this movie on the show since we started the show, and I'm the perfect kind of theme for this pairing, because I get to talk about this movie, and a lot of people might not know that Clive Barker's gay. And, obviously talking about the film we discussed last episode, although I'm pretty sure anyone who watched Camille wouldn't have been super surprised.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, that was kind of a par for the course movie in the 30s. So the 30s audience wouldn't have been surprised, at least.
Right. And I guess we'll just jump into it. I don't know if you have any current events you wanted to talk about before getting into the movie. It's been kind of slow, what with the strikes going on. Well, seems like SAG might be joining. The Directors Guild already is not going to strike because they had a deal.
I know, that's what I was going to say. I was going to say, talk about rude. Directors, stand by your writers.
I know, right?
Considering a bunch of them write their movies.
Right. But yeah, I can't think of any other small topics to discuss unless you have something in mind. So without further ado,
we did not have a small topic this week, so we're just going to hop right into it.
We're just going to hop right into it, which is good. So before I get into the nitty-gritty, what are you drinking this episode, T?
Okay, so I went and looked up a cocktail for this. There's a Hellraiser cocktail. But
oh, that's cool.
It required a whole bunch of stuff I didn't want to buy. So what I ended up doing is I picked up one of my old favorites. I always get it every year around this time of year because it comes out in a limited edition Pride bottle. Stella Rosa Black, which is one of the most delicious wines that I enjoy, and of course a bunch of people who are listening to it are probably like, oh, that's cheap wine you're talking about. I'm like, probably, but it's delicious. But it's from their Love series, and I really like that they every year they make their contributions, and they put out a nice little bottle. So I'm having the Pride edition of the Stella Rosa Black. And if you think about it, Stella Rosa Black kind of just sounds like a horror-y wine, so I think is
it like a red or is it like a rosé or?
It's a red. It's much more. It's very kind of like a mix of berries is the flavor that I'm sort of getting with it. Because they do all their different flavored wines, and this is kind of just it's just like a straight up berry one. But yeah, it's a dark, deep red color, and it's really, really tasty.
It sounds good, and it sounds like it's funny, we're doing the same thing. I thought after, again, it's been a few episodes, but I'm still kind of sick of cocktails after our comedy.
Oh my
pairing.
God. Dude, that was months ago. Let it go.
I know, but it's still, it's kind of like you say what you said a second ago with there being so many ingredients. So I wanted to do something simple. I thought about last month or whenever it was, I was talking about, maybe I'll do Bud Light. Nah, I felt like wine would be a good, because especially red wine, kind of like blood. I may have had this on the show before. I know I've had it in my personal life, but I'm not sure if I've ever had it on the show. But I couldn't resist. I'm drinking an Apothec Cabernet Sauvignon, and I literally just got it because I don't know if it's a seasonal thing or if it's like this all the time, but the label has a bunch of thorns and red.
Oh yeah, I've seen
it. Looks like blood. So I was like, I totally admit I may have done this before on the show. I don't think so because we've only been actively drinking alcohol pairings for the episodes for only maybe a year and a half.
Yeah.
So maybe not, but in case I did, I do apologize, but I couldn't resist. The label was just too perfect for this movie.
Oh yeah, and that's basically how I picked mine too. I was like, "Oh, I'm going for the Pride bottle for Pride Month." So
right.
But
so cheers to that.
Cheers. And what are the notes of yours?
All right, so before I ask you what you think, got a lot because I'm going to go into the movie and then I'm going to talk about Clive Barker a little bit. So Hellraiser.
No, I literally meant the notes of your wine.
Oh, it's good. I mean, I know I've had a Cabernet Sauvignon before. Probably, I think I even had one at the beginning of this year with our Lonely Hearts. I think one of those movies, I drank literally the same kind of wine. It was not Apothec, but maybe it was. How funny would it be if it's only been a few months since I had Apothec?
Well, if you've forgotten it already.
Now that I'm thinking about it, it's possible because of Harold's kind of weird suicide thing that he would do. I don't know. Maybe that's when I did it.
Harold just wanted some attention.
Right? So Hellraiser. This is the OG Hellraiser, not the reboot that came out last year, although might touch on that a little bit. Even though you haven't seen it, maybe you'll be curious or something. But so this came out on September 18th, 1987. Perfect timing right before Halloween. Budget was £1 million estimated, so around £1 million, and its worldwide gross was $14 million. So it did well, but I mean, I don't know if you remember back when we talked about Friday the 13th, how that had under $1 million budget and it grossed tens of millions.
Wow. Oh yeah.
50, I'd have to go back and look that up, but it was 50 million or something. So not a massive hit. This is even still kind of considered a cult movie. I I would argue that in the sphere of horror fans, it's considered a classic. It's definitely not as well known as like, you know, the big blockbuster stuff like, you know, The Conjuring or the slasher movies or whatever. It's kind of weird.
I would kind of argue that it's outgrown its cult status and it's basically mainstream now.
I think it's pretty like even people who haven't seen it, I think, are aware of it. And I even told you this because for anyone who doesn't know, T is you were aware of it.
I was definitely aware of Pinhead at least.
Gotcha. Well, and that's the thing. Like I told T this before going into it because I knew the cover of or poster or whatever you see of this movie would probably turn off a lot of people because it looks way more intense than it actually is.
Yeah.
And I feel like even with like scary movie fans, a lot of people probably avoided this one because they were like, what is that? Like, you know, they might have been just turned off by the cover. So I think that's part of it. It's also a little bit more of a nuanced sort of story and vibe it's going for. So I'm not surprised that it wasn't a mega hit when it came out because I think it might have weirded out a lot of people. And for more casual moviegoers, I think they would have been scared to see it because you see a guy with just nails in his head. And you're going to think like, okay, this is too much. Yeah, so this was written and directed by Clive Barker. This was his directorial debut. It's based on his novella, The Hellbound Heart.
Which, by the way, you mentioned this earlier. That is such a prettier name. It just sounds...
It's better...
Maybe not prettier,
it's a better title.
It's definitely a more artistic title.
I think the title change was his idea, and I think it was a smart one, because I think when you're going for, like, the grindhouse movie people, like, calling it something like Hellraiser is gonna get more butts in seats. So right. I think The Hellbound Heart is a better title. However, I don't think it was a bad idea to change the title. From my research, I found out that it's very different from The Hellbound Heart. I did not read it going into this.
Fake fan.
Like I didn't have time. And also
fake fan.
I probably will in the future though, because I'm guessing the core story is the same. I'm guessing what he changed was probably some stuff with the Cenobites. But so he was the sole writer. Like it says, written and directed by Clive Barker. So he had full creative control over the script. The composer, who I want to shout out, because this is also one of my favorite horror movie musical thing. It's Christopher Young, and the main score, like the opening credits, I love it. It's so mysterious. Oh my God, somber.
I said that too. I said I'm liking the music here.
I love it. It's easily like in my top 5 like horror movie scores. So Christopher Young, excellent job. And I'll get into this maybe later too. I wasn't planning on watching the second one because I've got the dual 1 and 2 collection, but I got bored up and just ended up watching it before. And it looked like he did the music for that one as well. I don't think he did all of them. We'll talk about the franchise, quote unquote, going into it. This is a bit of a mess as far as that goes. Makeup was done by like a team of people. It didn't have like a company name or whatever, but Bob Keane was like the main guy. He was nominated for some awards. And in my research with Clive Barker talking about the film, he mentioned like working specifically with Bob Keane on getting the look of the Cenobites right, because he really wanted them to look super unlike any other kind of like demons in any other movie. So Bob Keane was the guy who
and now that you mention that, you're right. I think actually I've seen some stuff, and Chris, nothing's coming to mind right now. That actually I will say this. No, the one I'm trying to say is the Cenobites kind of reminded me in a similar style to some of the transformations or mutations in The Thing. And I don't know if you got that, but some of especially the weird scorpion thing. I don't know if you got that vibe at all.
Scorpion thing. I'm trying to think of which.
Okay, the best scene to remember is when you think they're about to leave, the door opens, and then her.
Oh, and the one walking up the stairs.
And then it goes for her boyfriend first, and she takes him, and then they kind of like fight over. That thing. Yeah, I wouldn't call that thing a Cenobite. That's more of like just a random demon monster that's roaming around. The Cenobites are like the
S&M leathery people. I thought you were talking about it's
with this
girl,
much use of leather. You didn't know he was gay, really?
The girl. Well, again, I wouldn't say I was surprised when I found out. I was just like, wow, how did I not know this forever? But no, I thought you were talking about the girl Cenobite, which I call the throat goat for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
No, so going back to that, so the lead Cenobite, which I don't know if you caught that in the credits. I told you this before you'd seen the movie, but Pinhead was not his name. Yeah. That was just something the fans called him, and I found this out watching the sequel as well. The second movie is when he started being called Pinhead in the credits. But the lead Cenobite was played by Doug Bradley, and he would continue the role up until the recent film. And I actually thought that he had passed away, and that's why they replaced him. No, that's not the reason why there's a new Pinhead called the Priestess in the new movie. So he's still around, which is good. I'm glad he didn't pass away. I just thought maybe that had something to do with why.
Right.
So this was nominated for it was nominated for 6 awards, and it won 2 of them. Both of the awards went to Clive Barker. One was the Avoriaz Fantastic Film Fear Section Award, went to Clive Barker. And then the Fantasporto Critics Award went to Clive Barker. I do want to say one of the funnier awards this was nominated for was a Saturn Award for DVD collections, which I just think that's funny that Saturn has a category for DVD. Like, I actually think that's, as funny as that sounds, I think that's genius, and I think that needs to be normalized because one of our past episodes, I went on a mini rant about how it feels like no one puts any effort into like bonus features anymore.
Right.
So it's funny.
Or even their DVD menus. Like my favorite DVD menu is still, I think it's Down with Love. But so, there's no artwork in it anymore.
Right. So the funny thing is the DVD collection that was nominated is the one that I have. And I will say I'm glad it didn't win the award because it is so basic. It's funny. We just reviewed Evil Dead 2 less than a year ago, and when we reviewed it, I was talking about how good it was and how much care and attention went into like how much bonus material there was, and the 4K like scan of the film. It's, you know, it's Evil Dead 2. It's like a stupid movie, but man, it looked really good. Like, those cheap effects have never looked better. I gotta say, this was clearly just the DVD collection updated to HD. Mm-hmm. And I'm happy I own the movies, but nobody gave a crap about this DVD collection. Yeah. So the fact it was, I guarantee it was nominated for the award when the DVD came out, probably in the early 2000s when it was still like impressive to have a DVD collection.
Yeah.
But I'm happy I have them on Blu-ray, and I'm happy I have the 2 Hellraisers that I actually care about. But it's so low effort, and there's no bonus features. The only bonus feature on both of the movies is the trailer, the theatrical trailer. So you could have won a Saturn Award, guys. If you'd put a little more effort in, that DVD collection award would have gone to you.
Listen, hey, at least you didn't get your DVD collection. You found out one of the movies was put on the disc at the incorrect aspect ratio, and they didn't fix it until the Blu-ray release. Right. That happened with Airport.
There's lots of things, like even not DVDs, but the famous Simpsons aspect ratio on Disney Plus that they still have not fixed years later.
It's probably too expensive.
It's ridiculous. It's funny because a lot of the jokes are being cut out of the whatever.
Yeah.
So that is the stuff on the movie. So going into Clive Barker, he did not really direct a lot of films. He's more of an author. He's written some video games, and as I found out in my research, he has a little bit of background in theater and directing for that. But some of the only he stopped directing movies by the early 90s, but some of his other notable films that he directed was Nightbreed, Lord of Illusions, and a short, The Forbidden, which is actually what the film Candyman is based on.
Oh, okay.
So, and that he has a writing credit for because that's also based on, his short story, The Forbidden.
Right, that makes sense.
And Candyman was directed by Bernard Rose, but co-written by Clive Barker. So he's pretty old. He was born in 1952 in Liverpool, England. He actually let me see if I can remember the street. But he grew up on Penny Lane, which is the same Penny Lane from the Beatles song. So Beatles connection there. His favorite author is Edgar Allan Poe. I can kind of see that in his short story collection, The Books of Blood. He actually has one of the stories in The Books of Blood is a sequel to Edgar Allan Poe's story, The Murders at the Rue Morgue.
Oh, I love that one.
So he wrote a sequel to it, or
and it's in the Books of Blood.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, it's in Books of Blood. That, and I told you, I think Death and Starshine you would also like. That was the short story about the undead theater troupe.
You know what? I might have to go and pick these up. We just got a horror bookstore that opened up right by me. I might have to pop over and see if they have these.
They're good. Again, like, because it's an anthology, there's some stories that are better than others. So, like, and we'll probably have differing opinions on which ones we like better, but it's the same deal. Like, in fact, the namesake of the collection, I think you'd like that story because as a fan of paranormal things, that story is about a guy who is faking being a psychic and like speaking to ghosts. And so the ghosts take revenge on him by writing their stories into his flesh. So he is a literal book of blood, like.
Oh, I like that.
And that's the first story in the first volume, and it's explaining what the title means, but it's also like a fun little, and I shortened it. But you being a fan of paranormal investigations, I feel like you would be equally angry if you found out someone was faking it, and probably would agree that they had that coming.
I mean, at that point, burn the house down, kill their family.
Right?
I'm sorry, what?
So. I feel like every episode I bring up Red Letter Media, but I have to because a while ago. So this is not the first film adaptation of his work. A couple of movies had come out before this, but the reason he directed this was because he disliked the film adaptation so much. And I'm bringing up Red Letter Media because they reviewed one of his bad adaptations, Rawhead Rex, and Jay kind of posed the idea, I think he might have directed Hellraiser because of how bad Rawhead Rex was. So, Jay, you're right. It turns out that is on the books. He straight up said, he thought Rawhead Rex was such a bad adaptation of his work that he went into Hellraiser with the intention to direct, so, he'd have, final say on how it was and everything.
Yeah.
Fun fact about him, despite being a decorated horror writer, he is actually a big weenie in real life. He's actually got a fear of blood, and seeing it in real life makes him faint.
Oh, okay. I mean, that actually
it's kind of ironic.
Right.
A lot of his stories are super violent, so it is ironic. He's close friends with Neil Gaiman, who we've talked about on our show with Coraline. Mm-hmm. Currently, he lives in Beverly Hills with his partner, Johnny Ray Raymond Jr., and they've been together since 2009.
I mean, he's from London. He chooses to live in L.A. I mean, just no offense, but...
Right?
London's just infinitely more interesting.
It's those property... I feel like it's those property values here in California. I'm sure he'd love to move, but that house in Beverly Hills is probably way more expensive than anywhere. So, I mean, you could sell it and buy a house way cheaper somewhere else, but maybe that's why. Maybe he just likes being here. I mean,
maybe
he's right next to West Hollywood, so he doesn't, he can...
You think he goes clubbing?
Party all the time. Yeah, I definitely think he... Maybe not as much anymore since he's like an old boomer, but I definitely think back in the day he used to.
He used to club all the time.
So in the Independent on Sunday in 2006, he was ranked number 72 out of influential gay men and women.
Okay, very good.
Very
good, Clive.
And one quote I think speaks... I've got way more quotes from him, but we'll end on this before... getting into your opinion. Oh my goodness, it's because I wrote this weird. I'll say the quote. So I think this really speaks a lot about the way he writes stories, but he said, "I firmly believe that a story is only as good as the villain."
That's true. That is really
right?
true. Because if you have a shallow villain or one that you're just kind of just either not believable or something like that, it's kind of just Well, it really diminishes any heroicness of the hero. Because
I think it speaks a lot on the way he tells stories, and there's another quote later on that I'll get to, but like he seems very interested in kind of explaining the perspective of the monsters in his work, whether they're just truly evil or whether they just like come from another plane of reality or something. Like he seems very interested in, like I've talked about this on the show before, there's multiple ways of writing a villain, but the two kind of big ways are, one, really explain their motivation. Good example of that is Thanos in the Avengers movies. Everyone was saying at the time, wow, he actually has a point. Doesn't mean what he was doing was right, but you can understand why he was, trying to zap away half the population.
Yeah.
The other way of writing a villain is to not say anything about them. It makes them more mysterious. It makes their motivations seem more cruel. Two examples I can think of off the top of my head are Darth Vader and Nurse Ratched from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Ratchet's a perfect example because she's really mean, and for like a nurse at a psych ward, it's like the only way you kind of think of is like she just must be a bitch. Why would she be like this? So those are the two ways of, there's more than those two ways, but those are like two very prime ways of writing a villain in a story. Tell us everything or tell us nothing. Right. Either have us like kind of empathize with their side or have us really not understand why they do what they do. So last thing, and I should have said this before, but the way I wrote my notes, I had almost forgotten the cast, and so I wrote this at the bottom of my notes for the first page. But so the main cast, I already mentioned Doug Bradley as Pinhead, but you've got Andrew Robinson as Larry, Claire Higgins as Julia, Ashley Lawrence as Kirsty, and Sean Chapman as Frank. So T, what did you think?
I think you're my friend, so we should change the subject. No, I'm just kidding. I was honestly underwhelmed. Interesting. Like, it was not at all. I would never classify this as a bad movie. To me, it almost just felt. It felt incomplete. I was very unfulfilled by the end of it, or unsatisfied.
The ending's a little. It works, but it is a little abrupt.
Well, that's not even... That's not even what I mean. It's just... I just felt there was... Like... So, the whole thing with the dad's brother and... I forget what his wife... Julia. That was weird to me. And then, he I guess disappears at some point from her, and so then she decides to. That was weird to me. Why she was helping this person come back to life was also weird to me. It was very, very odd. I will say that one of the best things about it is the things that grossed me out was the character slowly coming back to Frank, slowly, coming back to, what's the word I'm looking for? Real, I guess.
Yeah, getting his body back. Yeah,
getting his body back.
Becoming whole again. Like,
yeah, that was incredibly disgusting. But the work done on that was quite impressive. And then I still didn't exactly understand what... and I forget what their names are. The demon people. They are
Cenobites.
I almost wanted to say carcinogens. I don't know why, but the Cenobites. I wasn't exactly sure what their deal was. I didn't fully understand the deal he made with them.
I'll get into a little bit of the lore here. So first off, I'll tell a little story, and I think I've told this story before. So I've talked about how I got into horror. I think I told the story of like going to see Saw 3 at a young age with my friends from school. But so like really early, like I'm remembering this as being like when I was like at an old house I used to live in, which would mean I'd have to be in like second grade or something, which is crazy. But like, so way back in the day, AMC, before they were, doing TV shows and stuff, they were essentially like a movie channel. Like that's all they did. And I remember always loving their Halloween. And, you know, I could just watch all of these movies I shouldn't be watching, but they were edited for TV. So I felt safe watching them. And Hellraiser was one that I watched on AMC, and I caught it right when it had started. So I was able to watch it from the beginning without cutting into the middle. But I had seen the posters. I knew about the nail-headed guy. Mm-hmm. But when I was seeing the promos for the movie and when the movie had started, it was so not what I was expecting, and I got really wrapped up in the romantic drama, which is why I thought you would like this. It's interesting. So, like, one of the reasons I think this is a genuinely good movie, and I always tell people you should see this, like, don't be scared of the cover, like, it's got a good core story, is if you strip away all the supernatural demonic stuff, what you got at its core is a love triangle. You've got Larry loves Julia, Julia loves Frank, and Frank loves himself. But and that's the thing, if you took the Cenobites away, it could be like the story of a woman who's, like, you know, harboring like a serial killer or something like that. And I think that was, it's funny too, because I always tell people, like, you know, despite Pinhead being on the cover, he's not even really the villain of the movie, like Frank is. And that is oddly, like, it's such a compelling little, like, story. Again, you could take the Cenobites out of it and it would still be a really good movie if it was just like about a serial killer and she's bringing him victims or something like that. Right. But as far as, like, a lot of this is, like, not straight up told to you in dialogue, and I kind of got it, like, even at a young age I understood. But, like, so
now you're calling me dumb.
No. Because I was watching it and I noticed they didn't really, like, talk. There was a lot of scenes with very little dialogue. Hilariously, the opposite was true when I was watching the second one. Like, they were over-explaining things to the point where the dialogue was kind of unnatural sounding. And then there was, like, ADR that was obviously added in because it's like, nah, the audience is stupid. We need to explain more. No, but like, so the gist of it is that Frank is, as you could tell from the pictures Julia found, he's a bit of a sexual deviant.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, the deal is, like, he kind of mentions it briefly but doesn't go into it, but he's like, even in the flashback there's, like, a sex scene with Julia where he's like, it's never enough.
Yeah.
So, like, he had heard of this thing that would open a portal to, like, a dimension with, like, new physical experience, and he didn't realize that it was not really what he expected. You know, so that's really it. And then as far as, like, and it gets more into, like, the lore of the Cenobites in the sequels and everything, but like, really that's it. It's like, oh, there's this puzzle box that will, you know, it'll take you to a world of pleasures beyond your imagination, and, you know, it's a be careful what you wish for sort of scenario.
Okay.
And then you know, he comes back and it's like, okay, I need to keep killing people to get more of my body back. And I need to do it quickly because otherwise the Cenobites are going to come back and get me. And that's where, like, I wonder how much is the same from the novella, because I feel like the Cenobites might have been a lot less elaborately thought out in the novella.
Yeah.
Doug Bradley said, like, when talking about the Cenobites, he says, the Cenobites are wardens of hell and demons are their escaped inmates. So that was his understanding of his character Pinhead. Like, these are the guys that run the show down there, and Frank is just, like, one of their escaped prisoners, you know, as well as, like, you know, any demons that, like, come to Earth and stuff. They're, like, escaped, you know, people from their little prison.
Aren't they unaware that he's escaped? Doesn't, like,
they're bad wardens. What can you say? You know, so accidents happen. No, but, like, well, and that too. Like, when she says that Frank escaped, they don't even believe her, and when they find out he did escape, they're pretty mad.
Well, what's funny to me is, like, they're like, yeah, just lead us to Frank or whatever, and we'll let you go. At least I thought that's what they said. And then so they get Frank, but they still want her. I'm like, why?
So, yeah, I mean them's the rules, man. You open the box, you come with them. Which
Yeah, but they said that but they just said they'd take somebody. So she says,
he said there's a pause and he says maybe.
Oh, that is true. Maybe he does say maybe.
So I mean, what choice did she have? It's like come with them right now, or having a chance.
What is the daughter's name again? I forgot what her name was.
Kirsty.
Kirsty, that's right. Okay, the fact that Kirsty, when she sees Frank in her dad's skin, isn't like, oh my god, Dad, what's all this blood around your scalp? And,
right? I thought that was kind of funny too.
That was kind of that'd be like that was very much that very much should have been oh my, what big ears you have. scene.
So this was a fun little factoid I found out during my research. So that line you mentioned at the beginning of our episode, "Come to Daddy." Mm-hmm. So that was actually ad-libbed by the guy who played Larry, who at that point was playing Frank pretending to be Larry. But Andrew Robinson, that line was made up on the spot, and Clive Barker was like talking about how he was working with very like classically trained actors for this movie, and he has a background in theater, and he mentioned how a lot of them like came up with lines that were like better than what was written, and that was one that I'd say is probably one of the iconic lines from this.
Oh, so unsettling.
It's so, especially that it's her uncle. Like, God, that is so gross.
Well, you know what they say, everybody has a creepy uncle.
I mean, if you are going to have a villain who has to out-villain a dude with pins in his head, he's got to be a sicko. Like, he's got to be real bad.
Now, the real question is, but you brought something up when you just said this. You said the real villain. I mean, the villain out-villains a guy. You're talking about... Oh my
Frank.
God. What are their names again?
Larry's Kirsty's father. Kirsty's the girl.
The demon people.
Oh, the Cenobites.
Thank you, the Cenobites. You're like, so what you have explained to me, it doesn't sound like the Cenobites are evil at all. And I think that's what you were trying to get at earlier when you said...
I think I even mentioned it before you watched the movie. Like, that's the thing. Despite the fact that they're all over the marketing, they are monsters. They do, torture people. But they're not, like, you could make an argument that they're evil because they're from hell and whatever, but really, they're not going to bother you unless you call them. And that's something I thought was really interesting when I discovered this movie as a kid. Like, I didn't find them particularly scary because they're not going to mess with you unless you want them to.
Yeah.
Obviously, they really wanted to take Kirsty, but, I mean, hey, she opened the box. And I mean, technically, Frank told her not to touch the box, so I mean, whose fault is that? But
I mean, but then does that make Mike a good guy? I mean, not Mike, Frank a good guy. He was looking out for Kirsty.
He was, because he was looking out. No, but and that's the other so this franchise is a mess. And they do go more into the lore a little bit going forward. This is one of those where it is the sorry state of the Hellraiser franchise is just, this shouldn't have been a franchise. I do like the second movie, but I am of the opinion that they progressively get worse and worse. And the fans agree. Like, from what I understand, I think most people say the third one was the last good one. I disagree. I thought the third one was pretty schlocky. Like, I say 1 and 2 and then done with it. But it got so bad, like, there's a YouTuber I like, Pushing Up Roses, and she talked about the 5th Hellraiser movie, and she kind of confirmed something I believed when I saw it, is that, it was, some indie movie that they couldn't sell, so they just shot some footage of Cenobites, and it's like, it's a Hellraiser movie. Turns out that is exactly what they did. It was some, mediocre, psychological thriller about a crooked cop, and then it's like, and then we're in hell, and there's
Cenobites here, and then bam, we got a sequel.
Literally, it's been bad, and that's kind of, I talked about the reboot for our finale last year, and I might have given it 2 out of 4. I liked it, but It's one of those things where it's hard to judge it because it's very different from this movie. And in my opinion, it is worse. But I do commend it on trying to, do its own thing. They changed up the lore. In that movie, you get the puzzle box and you sacrifice, I think, 7 people. And then the Cenobites will give you one of a number of gifts. So that's like the lore they changed up for in the new one. And
Okay.
that I remember being kind of annoyed by that, but at this point it's like you need to change up the lore anyway because it's so and if you're going to change the story, it's so far removed from this movie at this point. And really my biggest problem with that movie was that the protagonist was really unlikable. I said it in my review and I'll say it again, the Cenobite makeup was awesome. Like that was the best thing about that reboot. They looked amazing. I actually like the replacement for Pinhead. The actress who did it was really good. I also like that they started out with calling her the Priestess. Although, again, it's just like Pinhead. No one ever calls her the Priestess in the movie. That's just what she's listed as in the credits. So whatever. But
So did it really even matter if she got a name?
so
Is
like
essentially it.
right. So the thing is, like, you don't need to know a lot of the lore for the Cenobites for this story to work, in my opinion. All you really need to know is that like he escaped them and now he is on the run. You know, like he needs to get his body back so he can leave, so he can escape them for good and, you know, go off. But if you're curious, because it sounds like you are, the lore with the Cenobites in the sequels is that is what happens to you when you call the Cenobites. You become one of them after X amount of time, like being tortured by them, you become another one of them, which kind of explains like how all of them almost have like different looks to them, like different, like sort of like torturous, like almost like kinky kind of, you know, the girl with, I call her the throat goat because her throat's open.
Yeah.
And then you've got the Chatterer, you've got the one with his eyes sewn shut and stuff. So like the idea is and that was the thing I thought was also very intriguing, is that just like in this movie, how Frank is really the villain, like in the sequels, just the idea that there are people so depraved that they want that, they're looking for this box and they want to call the Cenobites. That was like the thing about this universe I found scary to an extent. Like the fact that there are people out there who would like look for this kind of thing.
Right. Like what's wrong with
And
that?
that's actually kind of the ongoing thing. In the good sequel, even in the bad sequels, they do run with that, is that like the villain in each movie is like the person looking to make contact with the Cenobites.
Yeah.
You know, and then they end up becoming kind of the antagonist in the movie. In the second one, the Cenobites kind of end up being heroic at one point, which is interesting. But like they give Pinhead a backstory. I forget, he was a British officer in, I think, World War One, and like the PTSD made him get into like really weird stuff, and so that's why he ended up looking for the box, and then he became Pinhead and stuff. But like that's the lore. It's like you call them, they take you, and you become one of them after a certain amount of time. So that's what would have happened to Frank. And again, I don't know if that's in the novella. I just know, like, in the sequels, as they expand on, like, the lore and everything, that's what it is.
Okay, so I have a couple more questions then.
Yes.
During the sequences, like at the beginning or when he's being taken back, what is the deal with this spinning column that had body parts nailed to it?
I don't know exactly. In the second one, it kind of is almost like there's this weird like outer god thing in hell that kind of resembles the box, and I don't know if there's something with that. I think it was just supposed to be like shocking, spooky imagery.
Okay. Okay.
It's kind of like with the hooks, how they just like magically hook into people and stuff. It's like I think they were just trying to come up with like scary imagery. And it's like the idea of like ripping off pieces of people and nailing them to this weird spinning box. I don't know. And I still don't know. Even in my research, there was never a specific mention of the spinning box or whatever. It's just, it's a thing.
Okay, and then my other question is, so parts of Frank were still in the house? Because
In what are you talking about? Like the heart that was under the floor, or
well, I mean, like, you know, the blood drops on the floor, and then all of a sudden he starts resurrecting from under the floorboards. So he was still technically in the house.
I think, in the second movie, they seem to establish it's like wherever you were killed is where you can be resurrected by putting some blood on it. So,
oh my God,
as we see at the beginning, that's where he's doing the little seance thing with the box. So that's where they took him. That's where he, like, quote unquote died. So that's like where the blood, you put it in the floor there. And again, I should have read the novella, but I feel like maybe that is some imagery left over from the novella, because when I hear the hellbound heart and there's like this heart-like thing under the floor that's beating, and that was even in the sound design, like anytime they were in the attic, there'd be that thump, 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 thump. So I wonder if that was more prominent in the novella, because that seemed to be kind of a big thing in the movie.
The other thing I was going to say is, okay, I totally think that the house they chose for this to take place in, they were going for Amityville vibes. Like, did you get that vibe? I totally got that vibe.
Potentially.
Because I'm talking about, like, the outer shape of it.
The interesting thing was that was a real house in England. Obviously, they also shot on a soundstage, but that was, like, a real house. And I do wonder, because one thing that's very like unique about that house is the stairwell, because it's very narrow, and it worked with a lot of, like, with Kirsty trying to be avoided, like being noticed, and same thing like when Julia was like trying to hide bodies and stuff. So they picked a good house, because that whole sequence, I don't know how that would have worked in a more like normal looking house. As far as Amityville vibes, it's possible. I didn't get anything with that from Clive Barker in his like talking about the movie.
Because I'm just looking about, because anytime they would come up to the house or leave the house, it kind of it had that barn shaped roof like the Amityville does, with the two windows at the top, and then especially towards the end when everything's glowing.
I think what it was missing, because Amityville, the real like unique thing about it was that it looks like a face.
Yeah, the eye shaped windows. Yeah.
I wouldn't say that this house had that same kind of look about it, at least from the outside.
Yeah, it might just be me. I really think for me it is the barn-shaped roof and the fact that it was always shown from the side.
I definitely get that. The thing that's kind of funny is from the outside it didn't look very spooky, but on the inside, and I think part of that was also because it was like Frank had just like disappeared, and so a bunch of stuff inside had like rotted away.
Yeah, so, and he was just like gross. That's part of it. He was just like nasty. Right? Well, so that was something else I was going to say. So this Jew disappears, right? Okay, so I have so many questions. And this kind of had, this one of the things that had led to my sort of ambivalence about it. So Frank essentially vanishes, but like I guess his brother doesn't know he vanished.
Well, so that's because, again, I don't know if you really picked up on it, but the guy is a bit of a degenerate. Like even Larry says, like, oh, maybe he made one of his famous great escapes or something. So, and just kind of the way he was, it's like I would not be surprised if he was a bit of a criminal. And also just doing weird stuff, like flying to some weird country to like look for some mystical box.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, that's kind of the thing where my disbelief is suspended, is that the guy lived such a weird lifestyle that I'm not really surprised his brother wouldn't really care or know where he went.
Right. See, at first I thought, he knew his brother was living there, and then he knew that he was missing, and so he took over the house. That's what I thought he was at first. But the fact that then they go upstairs, oh my God, are there squatters? And it was until they look at the stuff. Oh no, Frank was living here. See, that's what I thought it was.
Something that's,
because I'm kind of just well, I always like to know this. Why now? Why move in now? Do you know what I mean?
Well, because his daughter's going to school there.
That is true, I guess. Yeah. That is true.
So like, I will say, like, it is unclear if they knew Frank had gone, and if he hadn't gone, it's like, well, why would you try to move into his house? Like, obviously it sounds like the house belonged to both of them, but Frank decided to live there.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where it's like, it's not really explained, but I don't think it's necessary information. Because it could have been done off screen where they like called and they didn't get an answer from Frank, so then they flew out and then they saw the house was empty, and then it's like, oh, well, whatever, I guess we're going to move in.
That's true. Yeah. Okay. I'm on board now. Okay. Now I will say the movie did like one of the things that I hate when they do this in horror films. Okay, and this is like a small petty thing. Okay, moves into a house, right, to start a new life, I guess, essentially.
Yeah.
And then proceeds to not paint or clean the walls. That is, I don't know why, but that always bothers me. It's just like there's visible dirt and stains all over the place. Like, girl, put some paint up, wipe it down or something. Like, I remember when she goes to the bathroom at some point to wash the blood off of her face and everything. I'm like, I would not be touching anything in this house. Everything looks gross and nasty. Like, how do you feel clean living here at all?
They do make a point of that too. Again, this is one thing where it's like I give it a pass because it didn't seem like they had been living there for very long. It looked like they moved in, as soon as like their daughter was going to school there, and then they cleaned up the important stuff. And it's one of those things where I would imagine that there was still more home improvement to be done in the future. But they'd only been there a few days or a week or something, so they just didn't have time to clean any, do what you're saying, like, because I'm sure that probably would have been on the list of things to do.
I know this is just, it's stuff that just bugs me, but I've seen it like a few times in horror films, and I'm just like, just just the fact that nobody cleans doesn't make it horrifying. Like, that doesn't add. It just makes you be like, ew, what kind of people live like this?
If it cut to like 6 months later or something, with like a title card, I'd be much more on board. I'd be like, what's wrong with you people?
What's wrong with you people? This is normal too. And especially like right after now, this is, and I know they cleaned up the kitchen, got rid of all this stuff, but I remember right when they were, what did they say? It's when they're moving in, because at first they walk through and there was all that gross stuff all over the kitchen table, which, by the way, the special effects person on this movie loved maggots. I guess that was like a thing he loved. They were everywhere.
I didn't write down this quote, but there was a bit about Clive Barker talking about how like they had like a roach wrangler on set and stuff, and how weird it was, and like that was like a whole thing with the production. Okay. They had like an insect guy for all the gross shots of the like rotting food and everything.
Oh my god. You know what that reminds me of? The X-Files. There's an episode called War of the Cockrophages. It's about killer cockroaches. Anyway, there's more to it, but they said that they had like they had like 10,000 roaches brought in on set, and I think they said they only left with like 500 or something like that. Like 500 roaches just disappeared during the filming of this thing, over like it was like over 1,000. I don't know, a bunch of them disappeared. Like they left with like a fraction of what they brought in, and to me that's always been disturbing. I'm just like, ew, where did they all go?
That is the problem. Some of them are bound to get away at some point because, even if you have a professional roach wrangler, it's kind of hard to keep up with all of them.
Okay, so, but yeah, I remember when they cleaned out, and then Kirsty comes over, and I think she wants some water or something like that, so he goes over there. They're like, oh yeah, the kitchen, it's right there. I'm like, you don't go to the kitchen. I'm like, I know you cleaned it up, but still, that smell still has to be in there.
Right.
I don't know. These are just weird things that I worry about. So, okay. The plot though of, I guess the surface plot of what's his face? I'm sorry, Julia killing men to bring Frank back to life, to basically feed this creature. It reminded me, okay, do you ever see this really odd movie from the 70s called, I think it's called The Pit? And it's literally just this kid shoving people and other things into this hole in the ground, and the hole eats them.
Because I think I've heard of this.
I've watched this. It's a weird movie.
I kind of want to see it now. That sounds interesting.
I
haven't seen it.
I first heard about this because I went to a midnight showing of The Exorcist in Boston, and the print they had still had this trailer like tacked onto the beginning of it. And I was like, what is this? This cannot be a real movie. And it was. And it's just the weirdest thing ever. And like his teddy bear's like demonic. It's odd. It is the oddest thing ever. But you need to watch it. But that kind of reminded me a little bit of that. I do think when you were talking about I could kind of see this, like, if we didn't even have the supernatural element, like, being a lure for a serial killer or something. That's super interesting to me. And I guess, that part of the movie was pretty interesting for me to watch, because I like to see Julia work and these weird men that she'd bring back. And
that's why I expected you to like, and you didn't really say you disliked this, but that's the reason I thought you might enjoy this, is because at its core, it's got a very like soap opera-y kind of love triangle thing going on, and that's really what the core of the story is. Again, the Cenobites, they're what they are, but they're not super important until like the end of the movie, and even then they're basically there to be like, oh, you escaped us, haha, we've got you now, Frank. But like,
we got you back, and by the way, we're taking your stepdaughter, and no, you will not be housed together.
Well, and again too, like I saw this when I was very young, and most of the story is not super like gory or off-putting, like even and I think like the special effects are not something. I'd say the makeup effects are outstanding, but as far as like the gore and all that stuff, it looks very fake. Yeah. I would assume, even for the time. So like, I don't think this is, unless you just absolutely can't even take fake gore, I don't think it's super off-putting to most people, because it looks kind of fake anyway. So like, that was the thing when I saw this as a kid, is I was just really wrapped up in the, oh my god, are they gonna catch these people? Is he gonna become whole? What's going on with the, is Kirsty safe? Like, what's gonna happen with her? Like, I was all wrapped up in the story, and again, like, I was kind of just like surprised that with this movie where they have Pinhead on the poster, on the cover of the movie, all this, he's maybe in like 10 minutes or less of the whole movie.
Right,
which again
it's like Beetlejuice. Like, Beetlejuice is only in like 15 minutes of Beetlejuice or something like that.
Exactly.
But, the movie's named after him and everything.
Exactly. And I'm sure part of that had to do with, I think Doug was in makeup for something like 12 hours to get all the nails in and everything.
Oh,
like,
yeah, I could see that easily.
It was really, so part of it, I'm sure, was just,
well, because
it's a budget thing, and it's also like, this is very time consuming. If we're going to shoot any scenes with the Cenobites, they all have to go in for a ridiculous amount of time for makeup, so that takes a chunk out of the day. So like, I get it, but it's just interesting because, like, if there was like an honest poster of this movie, it would probably have like Frank popping out of the ground. Like, it'd be like a cutout of the house, right? And in the attic, you'd see like Frank pulling himself out of the ground. On the staircase, you'd have like Julia leading a man upstairs. You'd have Larry like oblivious in the living room watching the game.
Yeah, watching the game.
And then you'd have like Kirsty knocking on the door with her boyfriend. Like, if I was making like an honest like poster for the movie, that's what I would do.
Right. So, okay. Oh, I literally had something to say about this. Okay. Oh, no, okay. The thing with Julia, first off, I'm like, girl, what do you see in this man? Like, at all. And then two, when she gets all sensual with corpsey self, and like she puts his like half-formed finger like in her mouth, I'm like, girl, what is wrong with you? Like,
right?
No.
This movie, another thing I always tell people is it's got a lot of different vibes. There's aspects of it that remind me of Indiana Jones, with like the box, and like going to this like exotic country to find it, and the fact that it's like ancient and everything. Then you've got kind of almost like a fable fairy tale-esque kind of gothic horror story with what's going on there. And with Julia, I got like big evil stepmother vibes.
I didn't exactly get evil stepmother with her. She doesn't really become evil until Frank gets his hooks into her.
Potentially, but she did, sleep with him on the day of her wedding.
Okay, see, that was a question I have. Was that like a at the time seduction, or were they like having a thing beforehand?
I think that was the first time she met him, and I think for him, he doesn't care. I think he was just, he's very into like excitement and flings and sort of thing. But I think she like fell in love with him, with that one night stand, and then ended up marrying his brother, and never saw him again until his corpse pulled itself out of the floor.
What a weirdo.
So, right, and that's the thing. Like, I feel like this, you're not wrong to be like, why would she do this? But I think it's kind of almost like an abuse victim or something, because that's the irony, right? And that's how the movie ends too, is, you know, he stabs her and he's like, sorry babe.
Oh yeah. Why does she get all weird and drainy? Because I thought he thought he just stabbed her. Does like anything he kills get all weird and drainy? Or
I guess so, because that was the thing too, is like with the other guys, it was like he was like eating them and getting his fingers in them and all that, so it was almost like he was absorbing them.
Yeah.
I guess so. Like, it's one of those things where when it happens, you just sort of assume, oh, I guess that he absorbed her as well. You know, it's the end of the movie, and the end of the movie is probably the sloppiest bit for me. Like the very, very end, when they get out of the house and then she's like trying to burn the puzzle box, and then the homeless guy turns into a dragon skeleton and flies off with the box, and then brings it back to the guy to start over again.
To start the whole thing.
Exactly.
So why was the homeless guy following around Kirsty and not Frank? I guess watching Frank was
I don't think he knew Frank was out. That's the thing. Like, what I got from that was that he was like a demon in disguise. Like, he was almost like a minion of the Cenobites or something. Like, he cared about the box. That's what he wanted. And I guess the box was still at the house. So I don't know. He seemed very interested in Kirsty, but it seemed, again, what I would assume from what happens in the movie is that that's what he was looking for, is he needed to get the box and return it to the guy in Nepal or wherever they were.
You know, I figure, the way I look, like, now that I'm thinking about it, I guess the reason why, you know, with him being a supernatural entity, he probably knows it's going to end up with her somehow, and he's kind of just watching for when it happens.
Exactly.
Remember, he shows up on the walk, which I'm like, first off, kids, why are we walking through an abandoned district in some big city?
Ooh,
on a weekend?
I just thought of this. You know, the first time she encounters him is when she's leaving the house. So there you go. I bet he was like hanging out around the house trying to see who's going in and out of there because he knows the box is in there. Wait, that was the first time? And then he saw...
That was the
because remember she's walking out of the house with the guy, and that's where she sees him, I believe, for the first time. Or maybe it's not with the guy, but I do think she's leaving the house at night, like she had dinner with her parents, and then when she's walking, you know, she sees the guy staring at her, like when she's in the city.
Yeah, that's what I remember. I remember the first time seeing him, she's with her boyfriendy guy, and
there you go. Yeah,
they pass a doorway, and he's like peeking out, and so. You know, I thought, because I don't know, because this is 80s horror, you know, that stuff is like all over the place. I'm like, okay, are we going to go for an SA scene? What's happening here? And then,
oh god,
well, you know
the
what
80s.
I mean. They literally
no, I know what you mean. That's
unsettling, and it's like, oh my god, horror. Like,
well, and again, especially for the 80s, that was like prime for that kind of nonsense. Those kind of shenanigans.
The amount of sex scenes in this movie, I'm just like, this is a horror film. There are too many sex scenes in this movie.
Sex and violence are Clive Barker's bread and butter. You need equal amounts of both. It's the peanut butter and jelly for his story sandwich.
Okay. With his bread and butter being sex and violence, I do not want to be his partner.
Well, I mean, obviously he's not violent. Again, we're talking about a guy who faints at the sight of blood.
I'm just funning him. Clive, you're chill.
No, I got you. Even in the 90s, he was sick of horror. He had like moved on to writing different stuff. So, you know,
he's like, horror is passe. And okay, so that, and then the second time she sees him, I remember, is when he was eating grasshoppers.
Yes.
And until the ending popped up, and the thing where he shows up again at the ending, I was like, that is the most try-hard scare tactic ever. Like, really, just some homeless guy eating bugs. Like, I'm sure he's like eaten worse. But then when he,
there you go. It's neither a scare tactic nor is it offensive to homeless people, because it turns out he was a demon and he was just hungry, because we all know demons love bugs.
That is true. So
that is their favorite.
I actually kind of like the ending. The thing I find weird though is this just some random field that just has fires all the time? Because I swear it looked like a burning sequence in a music video. Like there were just individual pieces of furniture. Like the one I remember is there's right by the where the camera's at, there's just a single chair just on fire. I'm like, I was waiting for Madonna to come out from one of her Like a Prayer songs from the 80s and start doing a thing.
As I said, the ending works for me, but it happens so quickly. It's like within, after her and her boyfriend get out of the house, like it's 5 minutes or less before that whole sequence with the homeless guy becoming the skeleton dragon and flying off. And it's like, again, I understand what happened. Like, okay, he got the box and he returned it to the guy, but it happened so quickly and so abruptly after just, that crazy sequence of getting out of the house that it's like...
I'm just more disturbed. I'm like, did these children, like, just set individual piles on fire to decide which ones spoke to them, or is this just, like, a field where things are just perpetually burning? That is the question I wanted answered in the sequel.
It's just Lincoln, or not Lincoln. It's London. It's London. There's just fires in London everywhere. Okay. Haven't you been there before?
I mean, there's like 900 great fires in London, I think.
The London fires.
Okay, so the home that they are in, though, that everything takes place in, that is her like dad's childhood home, correct?
I suppose so. That's what I would assume if it was left to him and his brother. Which is interesting because he mentions Julia has a British accent vaguely, and he like mentions how they're back in her home turf. And I'm thinking like, well, wait a second, isn't this your house?
That's what I was thinking.
Wouldn't this be your home turf?
Wouldn't this be your home turf? And also, why don't you have an accent?
Right, and that was the thing too. Like, I haven't seen this movie in a very long time, mostly because I haven't owned it until very recently. But I remembered it's like this takes place in London. But then when I was watching it, I was like, does it though? Because no one has a British accent except like Julia, and vaguely Frank kind of has one.
Oh no, the men she pick up to. That's what confirmed it for me.
Right. But yeah, it's like weird. Like Kirsty's little boyfriend doesn't have one. Their guests, I guess some of them did. It's weird. Like it does take place in London, I believe, but it's weird because it doesn't really like show. It doesn't really explain where they are. Which I don't think it necessarily needs to. It's just very weird because sometimes it feels like you're in jolly old England and sometimes it feels like it could be anywhere.
I got Pittsburgh vibes a lot of the time. I don't know why. Oh, I guess also the people at the
Pittsburgh. No, I feel that. Especially with the bridge. There's a lot of bridges in Pittsburgh.
There's that, and then okay, I forgot also the old lady at the store that wanted to speak to the manager. I think she had an accent too.
One of the earliest film depictions of a Karen.
I know.
You gotta love it. They've existed forever, everybody. It's not just recently. We've only just recently given them a name.
I love how she was like, I want to speak to him now. Well, he's at lunch or something. Well, I would talk to him in charge. Well, girl, I'm in charge. Not you. Okay, well, what do you want from me? What do you really want here, babe? Like, what is going on?
It's also like a pet store. How upset could you really get?
Right, unless you took something home and it died immediately. Like, what's the problem?
What a stressful job to get when you're in college.
Right?
There's so many jobs. Like, there's lots of stressful jobs. You and I did stints at restaurants and whatever, but a pet store, especially like, now you've got like PetSmart and stuff, which are, closer to working at like Target or something, I would imagine. But God, imagine working at a pet store like that when you have to, do your research papers and all that stuff.
Oh my God. So there's a pet store by my house. It's like it's independent store. It's like a classic pet store, like this kind of pet store, where they have all these live animals there, like from snakes to like a whole section of just live birds, and then they have a whole bunch of mice, they have fish, they sell ducks there. Like classic pet store, right? Well, so I went there to get food for my pigs, and all the bags had these chew holes in them. And I go to check out and like, oh yeah, somebody like I guess left the lid open on I think one of the mice cages, and they all got out last night. It's just like, yikes. What even is this? But
that's chaotic.
Classic pet stores do still exist. Okay, but you know what could be worse? You could have been the pet store that sold the lady the birds that started the Birds movie.
It's so funny. We were just talking about, and I was thinking about that while you were talking about pet stores too, is how in that movie there's just a pet store for specifically birds It's the most bougie thing I've ever heard of. Like,
Well,
just birds.
And I love the, well, I can get you some by this afternoon. Like, girl, do you have like a bird delivery service that just is there to answer your call? What do you mean
FedEx
this
got
afternoon?
lazy, man.
Apparently,
but anyway,
so.
back to this movie. One thing, and I'm wondering if you kind of mentioned it before you'd even seen this movie. One thing I was wondering before I did the research and everything, and I've always thought this, is like the Cenobites kind of remind me of, S&M get-ups from the 80s, like gimp suits and sort of stuff like that. And I was wondering if that was intentional. It's like a chicken or the egg situation. This is the late 80s, so it was probably in reference to that movement in the 80s because it was coming near the tail end. But I was wondering what influenced what.
Well, the way I look at it is, I think especially like nowadays when people dress like all leather and all that sort of stuff, either they look like a tryhard or they look like, like a creep. Like, dude, keep your sex stuff like, in private. But I think back then, I just get the impression that, wearing like all leather, black leather and stuff like that was less of a just a sexual thing and kind of more just like an edgy, hardcore thing. I don't know.
It's very all encompassing because, famously sadomasochism became big in the 80s. Like that, now everyone thinks of it as like 50 Shades kind of thing because that's what got it popular again.
Right.
But in the 80s, it was really big. But on top of that, there was also, in the gay community, there was the kind of leather motorcycle look that was popularized by Judas Priest, because that's a metal band where their singer was gay, so that was a whole thing. And then there's also like the Village People. So like outside of the S&M thing, like black leather was like a whole vibe, a whole fashion vibe in the 80s. So, but again, in the 80s, S&M had its like probably most popular wave up until 50 Shades of Grey came out. And I like, especially after reading Books of Blood, one thing I noticed about Clive Barker is he likes to use monster as metaphor a lot, which is good, especially in a monster movie. It's smart to have them be representative of something. So I was wondering if he was maybe making a point about the sadomasochism movement at the time. And in my research, it's unclear. I wish we had him as a guest on the show, but it definitely was an intentional choice. I'll go ahead and read one of the many quotes I've written down. With Hellraiser, we were delving into the dark side of desire. This is an extremely dark story, but there's visual grace and elegance present. The imagery we're employing is, as far as the creatures from hell are concerned, something that hasn't been done before. They're like sadomasochisms from beyond the grave. In fact, that's what I originally wanted to call the picture, but they wouldn't let me.
I love that.
So he definitely was inspired. It kind of reminds me, like another story from Books of Blood. It's called Son of Cellulite, and it's a story about a guy. So it starts off, there's this criminal, he's killed a cop, he's on the run. And what isn't known to this criminal is that he has a tumor in his brain, and it's malignant. And so while he's on the run for the cops, he ducks into the back part of a movie theater, and it's like a little room behind the screen where the screen is like flipped so you can still see the movie, but it's like the mirrored version.
Yeah.
And while he's trying to hide out in there, he just dies of cancer. So the monster is his tumor that continued to live after he died and watched all of these movies. And basically its motivation is that it just wants people to look at it. And it has this ability to like shapeshift into different Hollywood stars. And that's like the thing with Clive Barker is he is so imaginative in the kinds of monsters he comes up with.
That's odd.
Yeah, it is. It's a good story, though. That was one of the good ones, in my opinion. Again, if you decide to pick up the Books of Blood, I'm sure you'll have your own opinion on which ones were good. But that one was so crazy. And also, I think part of it is like I'm a movie fan, so when the tumor is turning into like John Wayne and Marilyn Monroe and killing people, it was like interesting. It was a neat take. But from that quote,
it was a neat take.
But from that quote, I kind of got that the S&M look for the Cenobites, I'm sure, was intentional. Especially, like, you're dealing with a guy who is very, sadomasochistic in the way that, again, we go back to those pictures Julia was looking at of Frank in the beginning, and, him and his partners are wearing all sorts of weird costumes, and they're on all sorts of, like, poses, and it looks almost like creepy dungeon sex kind of stuff. So I feel like the Cenobites were supposed to be like a reflection of that sort of sin, more or less. Because if you really get to the bottom of it, the Cenobites are demons.
Right.
But I would say that they are demons of lust, despite the fact that, they rip people apart and stuff. But it is very sexual. And even the way they talk about, like, what they're very excited to, like, take Kirsty, like, oh, the sights we have to show you, and that other really great line, oh, don't cry, your tears are a waste of such suffering. It's like, and that's the thing too, like, that is elaborated on further in the sequels, is to the Cenobites, pleasure and pain are the same thing. So it is very sexual.
Okay.
Like, it is basically, if you call the Cenobites, it is S&M at its logical conclusion, and it might seem extreme to you, but they're just trying to give you the night of your life.
Oh my God, you know what I'm upset about? I'm upset that in the S&M music video, Rihanna didn't include the Cenobites.
They could. You know who I bet really likes this movie? I bet Lady Gaga does.
I could see it.
She's a big film buff. I bet she's into this movie. I'm surprised she hasn't referenced it in some of her costumes.
She might have. She really might have. Because you know what his outfit gives me vibes of? Do you remember the cover of The Fame Monster?
Yeah, a little bit.
There's that.
It's been a few years. It's one of those where I might be confusing it with a different cover, but I think I do.
Well, there's that, and then there is the Dance in the Dark single cover.
Okay.
In that one, she's literally wearing, like, I think, if I remember correctly... Actually, no. There is. I will send it to you later. There is a. What is it called? During the Monster Ball, she has a bunch of interludes. One of them is called the Manifesto of Little Monsters, and in it, she's wearing all these different just odd things, mostly like leather and stuff. But there's one that she's wearing. She looks like she kind of has like a leather bag over her head, and there's all these different needles and stuff stuck in it. And I'm like, I guarantee you that was inspired by Pinhead.
As I said, I know we both know she's a big film buff. Her Telephone music video was an homage to Tarantino films. Her 911 video we talked about in a short episode thing on our YouTube channel.
Well, The Color of Pomegranates.
That's what it was. And I really would be surprised if she was not a fan of this movie. Just based on her fashion sense, if she hasn't seen this movie, I bet she would like the Cenobites. She should have been cast as the priestess. She's an award-nominated actress. She should have been the priestess. I'm kidding. Like, I'm half kidding. It would have been really cool. But I don't want to poo-poo because I do think the girl who was cast was a really good replacement for Pinhead. But if it had been Lady Gaga, that would have been neat.
Now, I'm guessing, I think you may have already said this, but I'm guessing in the 2022 remake, there's a lot more of the Cenobites and Pinhead.
Yes. Also, the effects are better. You might want to watch it out of curiosity. Like I said, it's not bad. The thing is, as I said, my biggest problem watching it was that the protagonist was so unlikable. But the ending saved the movie for me. And I won't spoil the ending because it's what makes it all come together. But again, the gist in that movie is that the puzzle box, it still does what it does, but like when you call the Cenobites, you sacrifice people to them. And then once, I think it's like 7 people, and then once they've taken 7 souls, they will give you a gift. and that's
is it
either
is it
pleasure or
okay.
knowledge, or they have like they do a good job of explaining the
Okay.
lore. Like
Okay, so
that is something. Yeah.
So, but I mean, do they explain? Is it your pleasure or is it the Cenobite's pleasure? Because those are
I'll
two
spoil
different
that
things.
much. So spoilers for the new Hellraiser, if in case you haven't seen it and you want to see it. So the villain again is not the Cenobites. That's one of the things I think the movie got really right. So at the very beginning of the movie, it takes place in the 80s, and it's like a big, creepy, eyes wide shut party. And a guy like goes into this room and he finds the box, and then the guy whose apartment it is, it's like this big rich person penthouse apartment. He's like, oh yes, that's from blah blah blah, and he's like explaining all of it, and then he sacrifices the guy to him, and then that's like the opening of the movie. It jumps ahead to present day, and it's a whole new set of characters. So the big twist is that it turns out that guy is still alive after, and that was his 7th sacrifice to the Cenobites. And he asked for pleasure, but it was the Cenobite's definition of pleasure. So there was this thing in him that was tightening, basically like messing with his nerves in his body, and he couldn't get it out. And so he wanted the box again to, sacrifice 7 people to ask the Cenobites to get the thing out of him.
Yeah.
That's like the big twist, is like the guy from the beginning of the movie is the villain, and he's trying to kill a bunch of people again to get them back. So it's still got a little bit of that to it.
I do feel
you
like
really shouldn't be asking the Cenobites for anything, because they're it's like the monkey's paw is what they call it. Be careful what you wish for.
But they give you at least actual gifts. They're not gonna you kill 7 people and here's a $25 iTunes gift card.
Right?
Wouldn't that
Right?
suck? It's like gift.
$25. 7 people died for this. Come on. Could it
Yeah.
at least be $1 million?
Could it be $1 million? And it's the 80s. We don't have iTunes yet.
But that's why I was so torn, because again, I don't think it was bad, and it was much better than any Hellraiser sequel has been since Hellraiser 2. It's just disappointing that it wasn't better than it could have been. But again, if you think the Cenobites look cool, it's definitely got that going for it. I think all of the people they cast as the new Cenobites were really good. And the story's fine. Again, they changed up the lore, so it's different, but it explains itself. I understood what was going on for the whole movie. And again, there's a twist ending, kind of, that redeems it a little bit as far as the main character we're following. But other things I wanted to get into, just running off some of these quotes I wrote down. So for anyone who's seen the trailer to this movie or watched it on the bonus features, it starts off with a very, very, very impactful quote. I have seen the future of horror, and his name is Clive Barker. Stephen King.
I love that.
Stephen King said that. So he was a big fan back when Clive Barker, and that is how they sold this movie. The trailer for Hellraiser starts off with that quote, and then it goes into all the crazy visuals and everything. On the topic of Clive Barker kind of believing that villains are important in, horror movies and stuff, he said he wanted to speak on the condition of monsters. To deny the creatures as individuals the right to speak, to actually state their case, is perverse, because I want to know I want to hear the devil speak. I like that point of view. I like that a point of view can be made by the dark side.
I like that. I really like that quote.
Right? So on the topic of the reception of the movie, I thought this was a neat quote. Low-budget movie making is fringe theater, except that you can get the audience members I always wanted to get. It's what fringe theater claims to be and so often isn't. Non-elitist, populist. I saw Hellraiser a couple of months ago in a grindhouse on 42nd Street, and the audience, when they weren't making out in the back row, were really voluble. They were screaming at Kirsty, "Get out of the house, you stupid bitch." I loved it. Really liked how people were very actively viewing it, and again with kind of the theme of our show of coming at this from the non-pretentious perspective. He really likes that low budget movie making I get what he's talking about, because theater people are like another type of person that can be really irritating and elitist. And
Right.
you haven't heard of Modokin, the excellent French director from, like, it's the same deal where it's like, yeah, okay, your play might be very boundary pushing and everything, but you also get like snobby artsy types.
Yeah.
And I get what he means. I talked about this as far as like why I like horror movies is oftentimes the crowd kind of adds to the movie viewing experience. It's one of the reasons I really liked Barbarian when I saw it last year, is the crowd was very rowdy but not annoying.
Yeah.
And
They
I
were
liked
definitely
that.
they were definitely there to experience the movie. And, it's hard. I know exactly what he's trying to say, because everybody's there to experience it, but they're there to experience it for just themselves. They're not there to. It's hard to describe. I know what he's saying, and I love that he recognizes the ability, because he basically saying is the people who come to these low budget movies are people who want to be there.
Exactly.
It's what,
and who are going to be actively like paying attention, minus the people making out in the back row. But,
yeah.
Right.
Do people still
and
do
this
that?
is kind of, some people, in bad movies.
Welcome to the windows of Whiskey's world.
Oh yeah. No, but and this one's kind of a similar vein of quote, and this is the last one I wrote down, but I thought it was a good one too. He said, "It's interesting that nobody ever walks out of Hellraiser, but a lot of people cover their eyes. They want to know what happens. In a stalk and slash picture, once the gag is established, once you've met the victims and set up who's going to get knocked off, there's nothing left. It would be selfish and mean-spirited of me to suggest that this is not a tour picture. The whole thing is a communal experience. It's a different buzz from when you get to the end of a day and you've got 15 good pages. That's a very private victory. In films, the victory should be shared." So that was more of like his first time directing, but I think it also kind of touched on the reception of the film.
Yeah. Now, I will say that, I don't necessarily think that this is like going to be one of my faves or my new things are, but I really sort of respect what Clive Barker has said and how he feels about this. Because, he wasn't making this movie for, I don't know how the best way to phrase this is, he was essentially making the movie he wanted to make. And regardless of whether or not there was an audience for it. And he's happy that there was an audience, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But I just really respect what he was doing there. Now, I feel like I have a few notes for him that we've already talked about, but I respect how happy he is with his final project, and that, he's excited to see the common people get excited about it.
Exactly. And I think a lot of the more glaring issues with the movie probably have to do with the fact that he had never directed a film before. I think the only thing he had done was the short, which was like an adaptation of what was it called? The Forbidden, the thing that would eventually become Candyman. Yeah. I think he'd done that before, but I also might be wrong. I might have come later, but this was like his first real movie.
Yeah.
And I can tell he has a lot of theater experience, because this is one of those movies where I could really see it as a stage play.
Yes.
Because really, you could do it just all in the house, and then all of the stuff outside of the house could just be done in little sections of the stage that are made into like little mini sets or something. And even the way that it's done and everything is very like theatrical. In old school. Like, I've talked about that with other movies where like the way that they're speaking isn't necessarily naturalistic, but it's very theatrical. Yeah. And I think that definitely applies to this. And I think that is probably where some of the shortcomings come from as well. Because maybe you feel differently, but if you saw this as a stage play, do you think you would have been as hung up on the stuff that was confusing you about the Cenobites? Or do you think if you saw this as a play, you would have been more engaged with like the romance, the adultery, the murder, like that whole aspect of it?
Actually, when you brought up that it could work as a stage play, that actually, like, to, like, you heard me go, yes, because to me this very, when I'm thinking about it, and the way it's, even like the way it's presented, it does feel like a recording of a play. And I do feel like certain things, like the adultery and stuff, is really dependent on the energy of the room and of the performances. And I do feel like a live performance of things like that would be heightened, and I think I may have been, more into the story.
For sure.
Because I almost feel like sometimes when it happens on screen, and this isn't like a swipe or anything at Clive or anything like this, but sometimes it can come across as just, this has happened, okay, it's like, what do we do about it now? Like as opposed to when I feel like even things taking place in the past on a play, you're still much more in the moment than if you see it, in a film, if that makes any sense.
For sure.
Now let's talk about Julia for a quick moment. Okay.
Yes.
So I did notice with her, so she definitely goes through a major character change throughout thing. I would never put her, at least at the beginning of the film, I would not put her in the evil stepmother category. Later, yeah. But if you notice, she she becomes progressively bolder and sexier and sluttier as this goes on, like culminating in what I refer to as the David Bowie look, where she has she had like the red hair and then like the pink and blue major eyeshadow going on, and then there's that whole change of her from becoming, she's pretty meek and stuff at the beginning, and then she's like, oh yeah, I'm not bothered by boxing, all that sort of stuff. So what's interesting is, so she becomes more of a monster.
Yes.
As this goes on, it's almost like a possession.
Well, and I don't think she's like inherently evil. I think there's things.
Well, that's why I
like
said it's
right
kind
off
of
the
like
get
a
go.
possession.
Yes, like I don't think. Again, the evil stepmother thing, I agree with you. It progresses, because when you first see her, all you really get is that her and Larry aren't.
Like an awkward.
She doesn't want to move into the house.
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean,
however, I maybe I noticed this before. Again, it's been a long time since I've seen this, because I hadn't owned the movie until recently. But one thing I noticed in this viewing is that when Kirsty comes over, she says, "Where's Julia?" And obviously maybe that's the case because it's her stepmom, not her mom. But why, if she doesn't feel close with her stepmom, she probably would call her Julia instead of like mom or something. So, and that too, like later on, I think we see the wedding, and you can tell that Kirsty is like older. I also might be confusing that with the sequel, but anyway, like, so it happened when she was already like a late teenager, but that already is kind of like a disconnect between her and Julia. The other thing I did notice when I saw this as a kid and stuff, I always thought Larry was just kind of a, he was maybe an idiot, but I thought he was so mean this time watching it. I kind of didn't blame her for wanting an affair, because he was just sort of a dick to her, like when they were moving in.
Really?
I don't know. Maybe that's maturity on my side. If you don't want to watch it again, don't watch it again. But at least when I was, he was just very like mean to her when they were moving in, and like, oh, you never want to, not to the point of like he deserves to die or anything. Like he still is very much a victim of what happens. But it's, again, when I was younger, even when I was showing this to my friends in college, I always thought of him as, again, he was very oblivious to what was going on around him. But I was like, oh, he's like a nice dad and stuff. And in watching it now, I'm like, he's nice to Kirsty, but he's kind of crappy to his wife. So I don't know.
I might need to watch some parts of this again, because I didn't get that. But like I said, I may have missed something. No, but the reason I brought up Julia is because I like I said is it almost seems like she's not inherently evil. Like I said, it's more of a possession. Like essentially, Frank is essentially controlling her. And she becomes, as when we see with possession, there's 3 stages. It's infestation, oppression, and then possession. And she kind of goes through those phases of basically by him. He's not possessing her, but he kind of is, and she becomes more of a certain way. But what's interesting about that is she gets meaner, but to me, her victims become more innocent. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah, I agree.
like, at the
First guy she
beginning-
brings up is like typical nice guy, like,
Yeah,
you know,
it's like-
ooh, you're the most beautiful woman I've ever met. And then as soon as she's hesitating, it's like, oh, you're not gonna go back on it, are you? You know, like,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then by the time it's like that last guy, he's like genuinely kind of a pathetic dude, and you
Yeah.
feel like really bad for him.
Yeah.
And you're very right. It's like Frank's influence on her kind of changes her. And I think that goes with, like, that's part of the reason I wrote that one quote down about this kind of being about the dark side of desire. And that's why I think the Cenobites really work as sort of an S&M monster, because this is all about, you know, going for that dark desire, you know, which kind of like having an affair or committing adultery or sleeping with a really nasty guy like the day of your wedding, you know.
Also, no one smelled those 3 bodies.
I was wondering, and like rewatching it this time, I always was like, well, I guess she must have gotten rid of the bodies, but
Until
then it's
that
like,
last
well,
scene
where's
where
she
with-
putting them?
And then Kirsty's hiding behind the thing, and then one of them falls out. And I'm like, really? No one smelled that?
That was actually funny because I remember this movie not really having any jump scares, and when that happened, like at the ending when she's like trying to hide from Frank and the thing falls out of the closet, that actually got me. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, there's a few.
But yeah, so this is a very interesting, I would like sort of, I would say it's a very 80s movie.
Yes. And like it's a shame I can't really say that it's like perfectly
say, though,
sticks the landing, because this is probably Clive Barker's best movie he directed. I think it's way better than basically anything else that was ever adapted from his work.
Yeah.
But it does have some problems. And that's the other thing too. Like I listed off some of his notable movies. He only really directed like 5 movies. He this was his first one. He did a couple of others like Nightbreed and some of the other ones I listed off at the beginning. But again, by like the 90s, he'd stopped directing movies. He continued writing. Like, I believe he still even writes stuff to this day, but like as far as like making movies, he was pretty much done by like the early 90s. And it's kind of a shame because I feel like he had a real good idea of what he wanted visually.
Yeah.
Like I very much, again, after reading a lot more of his work, I really empathize with his frustration with how they messed up his work. Because again, in his writing, he has very like weird out there monsters that
Yeah.
are kind of hard to translate. And so, like, for instance, the tumor one I was talking about, that if you made like an episode of like a TV, you know, if you did like the Night Gallery and like used that short story as like a script or something, that tumor monster could look amazing or it could be the dumbest thing ever, depending on who's at the helm. And I really like that he put all of his effort into this. And again, I think it's just really tragic that they tried to turn this into a franchise, because it really shouldn't have been. And if it was going to be, they should have gotten, because Clive Barker never directed another Hellraiser movie. In all of the sequels, he's listed as a producer and he's listed as, you know, based on the characters created by, but he has nothing to do with them.
Yeah.
I think he was actually somewhat involved in the 2022 one, but otherwise, you know, all of the Hellraiser movies are like just milking it, which again is a shame. I wish he had kept going, because I do agree with Stephen King. I think he was a very inventive and, you know, unique voice in the genre, especially at the time.
Yeah, definitely.
And so it's I wish he would make a comeback. I wish he would get back into movies a little bit. That was another thing too. After reading the Books of Blood, I was under the impression Hulu did a series. I was wrong. They did a movie and it was awful. It was so bad. And you know how bad it was. I watched it in 2020 during lockdown and forgot I had watched it.
When I looked up the Books of Blood, that actually popped up. And
Yeah, it's bad. Like again, that's being bad is one thing. Being forgettable is a whole thing, a whole other thing entirely. And I thought that was because again, I saw it on Hulu and I was like, oh, there's a series, and I was like, oh, cool, I'll watch it after I finish reading these. Then I finished reading, started watching it, saw, oh, okay, it's a movie. Oh, well, maybe it'll be good. And then as I'm watching it, I was like, oh my God, I've seen this. I remember this. It's not good.
It was awful.
It's so bad. It's so bad. It's like if you decide to read the Books of Blood, I'll suggest you check it out so you can see what I'm talking about. It is not just a bad adaptation independently of the book. It's bad. It's so and that's what's so tragic. Like I said, there's not really a lot of good adaptations of Clive Barker's work.
Yeah.
Like in the film world, there's this movie, and then there's Candyman.
And that's it.
You know, and that's pretty much it. Like, again, I haven't seen the other movies he directed. What was it? So Nightbreed, Lord of Illusions, and The Forbidden was a short. I might want to check those out, but the fact I've never heard of them is probably a bad sign. But yeah, anything else you wanted to mention?
I do remember.
Or bring up or ask?
I was watching this with my mom, and she's like, yeah, I watched it because she thought, because she saw the images with Pinhead. She thought Pinhead looked kind of, different and interesting. So she watched it a long time ago. And then but then she was talking about, she's like, okay, is this like, she's like, they're trying to collect like body parts, right? And I'm like, no, it's not. And she's like, okay, then that's one of them because there's been like 1 billion Hellraisers. But she says, I'm pretty sure that's one of them. Is there one of them where they're collecting body parts?
That might have been the third one. Again, it is a mess. I like the second one. And I'll say that too. I almost forgot to mention this because as I said, I watched the second one before this recording just out of boredom. I hadn't planned it. And with the evil stepmother thing, there actually was a line about that because Julia comes back in the sequel and she and Kirsty are facing off and she's like, oh, you always thought of me as the evil stepmother. Well, now I'm the evil queen. And it's like... So I must not have been the only one to get that vibe. But yeah, it's a mess. Like I said, the fifth movie is about like a crooked cop and he's like stuck in hell. But again, that's the one where it wasn't even a Hellraiser movie and they tacked it on to like sell it. In the fourth one, they're in space and they come up with a backstory to where the box came from and they made it like a toy maker made it or something. It's a mess. I think that is, it's frustrating too because if you like this movie, you're just going to get depressed. If you watch every sequel, you're going to get more and more depressed because they just keep getting worse and worse and worse until it is so devoid of anything related to the first movie that it might as well not even be related in any way. So your mom is probably right. The fourth one I barely remember. The fifth one I remember hating. The sixth one I don't remember at all. The third one, I remember there was a Cenobite based off of a movie camera because there was like a character. And Motorhead did a song for it. They did a cover of Black Sabbath's Hellraiser for the movie, like as a ooh. But yeah, your mom's probably not wrong. But it was likely one of the sequels that wasn't very good.
Well, and I'm glad to hear that you think that this shouldn't have been a franchise because after watching it, I was like, I could not believe this became a franchise. I could definitely see it being what it is, a standout, on its own sort of different, sort of out there horror film. I can definitely see that and being supposed to that. And then, but like you said, I'm glad to hear that you, I guess in a way, agree with me that it really shouldn't have been a franchise.
It shouldn't have been. And even as much as I do like the second one, but even as much as I do, it is a mess. It's a lot schlockier. The dialogue is way more sloppily written. There's a lot of over exposition where they're just explaining things way too much. I think the reason I like it is because they spend a good chunk of the movie in hell, so you get to see what it looks like more, and it's a continuation of what happened to Kirsty after everything. So in that way, it feels much more like a natural sequel. Okay. But then after the second one, it is just new person finds the box and stuff happens, and that's kind of how they going on. And then not even, because as I said, it just gets to the point where it's like, there's this random movie. How do we sell it? Let's make it a Hellraiser movie.
Let's make it a Hellraiser movie. We'll get that Hellraiser cash, and yeah.
But no, as I said, I do think this made an impact. I think it is very iconic. And even today, I'm pretty sure a lot of people, I mean, hell, they made a reboot of it last year.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many people watched it on Hulu, but the fact that they felt that they could make a Hulu movie for it from 20th Century Studios. Yes,
Yeah.
that's what it is, because they can't say Fox anymore. I suppose there's still people out there who care about it, but I do think it was a standout from the 80s. I think there's nothing else like it.
Yeah.
And I think it's a nice little story. Again, I don't think you have to really be super into it, because at the core of it is that love triangle I was talking about. You could completely remove the Cenobites from this movie or any supernatural element, and it would still work. And I think that's why it's a solid movie. But
No,
what would you rate it at the end?
So, acknowledging all of that and just realizing that this just isn't a movie for me, I'm still going to give it like a 1.5. And just the reason just being is I just really shouldn't feel like the story was there for the movie. I mean, because I thought, as I don't know if you got the impression, I kind of feel like this would have worked really well as a Tales from the Crypt episode.
Yeah.
Because I almost feel like the story, and it's already short at 90 minutes, but I already sort of felt like it was stretched a little thin. But that's what I'm gonna say. It's by no means something that's like unwatchable or that I would classify as awful. It's just not something for me.
I feel that.
So in my opinion, I'm giving it a 1.5. But I am excited though to read some more of Clive Barker's stories. And, really kind of, because the stuff that you have mentioned already, just, it sounds weird, but it sounds interesting.
Oh, yes. How dare you, by the way? Never speak to me again. No. So, as I said, this is one of my all-time favorite horror movies. Going into this, I think I was planning on giving it a 3.5. But talking it over and also having, watched it recently for the show and everything, I hate to say it, but I do think that there are some amateur decisions that hold it back from being really nearly perfect. And I don't think that's Clive Barker's fault. This was like his first time making a movie. But I do think that, there are aspects of it that don't work. What I do think works is I think the story is extremely solid. I think the makeup work is amazing. I think that it is one of the best as far as that goes of the time. And I think the musical score, as I said, as far as horror movie scores, this is like in my top 5. It is such a good, just that opening credits music is amazing.
Yeah.
Also, I think the acting's really good too. Ashley Lawrence, who plays Kirsty, I think she is kind of underrated. I feel like she should get the Scream Queen treatment, because I also like that she doesn't become very cowardly. At the, I love that when she finds out that Frank is like an undead monster, she's just like, "F you." She doesn't get scared or anything. She gets mad. I like that. You know what I mean? Because I feel like especially in 80s horror movies, they just scream and run away. I like that she was not afraid to fight him.
Or she wasn't afraid
even
to call
as
him
scary
out
as he
either.
looked. Yeah, and I also like that she wasn't afraid to be crass and use that 4-letter word and everything. So acting, makeup, music, and just the story being very simple and solid. And for those reasons, I'm gonna give it a 3 out of 4. Obviously, I was gonna rate it higher, not 3.5, because as I said, as much as it pains me to say, there are things like the fact that the blood effects and everything do look very dated, I feel like, even for the time.
Yeah.
I do think I'm able to understand what's going on, but I do think that there were some clumsily done things. I do think if you did choose to watch it a second time, you'd pick up on things you might not have the first time and get kind of a better grip on it. But as I said, there's a couple of ways that it's fumbled, but for that reason, 3 out of 4 for me.
Well. I mean, that's still pretty high, so I'm not going to fault you for dropping it half a play, because that's still pretty up there.
We all knew I was gonna
I thought you were gonna be like, I'm dropping it from a 5 out of 4 to a 4 out of 4. But
what do you guys think? Was I too nice? Was T too mean? Was I too mean? Let us know. Hit us up on Twitter. If you're listening to this on YouTube, feel free to leave us a comment, a like, subscribe, what have you. Whether you're listening to this on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, wherever, we have a whole backlog of episodes, so if you like what you heard, feel free to listen to a different one. But until then, I have been Whiskey.
And I've been Sweet Tea.
Keeping it Kino.
And suck it, Scorsese.
Come to daddy.
Oh, God. See
Bye,
y'all.
guys.
Bye. Reels on the Rocks is a production of La Prince Laboratories. It is edited and produced by Alejandro Castillo and features original artwork by Asa Esparza and original music by Pat Mars. Follow us on Twitter at Reels on the Rocks and tweet at us with any movies or topics you'd like us to discuss in the future.